Welcome to Epic World History. In the year 1683, the fate of Europe hung in the balance. From the mighty Ottoman armies that marched upon Vienna, to the desperate defenders who refused to yield, and the rise of a king who led the charge that would change history forever. This is the story of courage, unity, and faith, the moment when Europe stood its ground and turned the tide of the world. In the summer of 1683, the Ottoman Empire, the most powerful Islamic empire of its time, set its gaze on Vienna, the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. The city stood as a gateway to Western Europe. If Vienna fell, the road to Rome and Paris would open. Sultan Mehmed IV's army, led by the Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, marched with more than 150,000 men, one of the largest forces ever assembled. Across Europe, panic spread like wildfire. The Holy Roman Empire prepared for what many believed could be the final battle between East and West, the Siege of Vienna. 1683, the stage was set for a struggle that would determine the fate of Europe for centuries to come. Kara Mustafa Pasha's grand army moved methodically through Hungary, capturing towns and fortresses as they advanced. The Ottoman banners, adorned with crescents and green silk, signaled both power and faith. Their objective was clear: crush Vienna, symbol of Christian Europe. Meanwhile, Emperor Leopold I fled the city, leaving Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg to command the defense with only 15,000 men. As the Ottomans surrounded Vienna, the thunder of cannons shook the earth. The siege began on July 14, 1683, marking the start of 2 months of terror and defiance. Inside the city, panic mixed with determination. The defenders' soldiers, townspeople, and even monks worked tirelessly to repair walls and dig trenches. Food and gunpowder grew scarce as Ottoman bombardments tore through the defenses day and night. The citizens of Vienna knew surrender meant death or slavery. As weeks passed, the smell of gunpowder and smoke filled the air. Every sunrise brought new assaults. Yet von Starhemberg inspired courage, swearing to hold the city until relief arrived, or until the last man fell. Beyond Vienna's burning walls, Christian Europe stirred. Pope Innocent XI called for a new crusade, urging kings to unite against the Ottoman threat. The Polish king, Jan III Sobieski, answered the call. Known as the Lion of Lech, he gathered his famed winged hussars and marched toward Vienna with 30,000 troops. Alongside him came forces from the Holy Roman Empire, Bavaria, and Saxony. This alliance would form one of the most powerful coalitions in European history. Time was running out. The defenders of Vienna had only weeks left before total collapse. As August arrived, the Ottoman army tightened its grip around Vienna. Siege trenches crept closer each night, while massive cannons thundered relentlessly against the city's bastions. The defenders, exhausted and wounded, fought with desperation. Disease spread in the crowded streets, and food supplies dwindled to crumbs. Yet Kara Mustafa Pasha grew. Frustrated, Vienna refused to fall. He believed victory was inevitable, unaware that Sobieski's relief force was already crossing the Danube. The fate of Europe now depended on who would reach the city first, the rescuers or the conquerors. Within the battered walls of Vienna, life itself became an act of defiance. Every man, woman, and child took part in the struggle. Women melted down family heirlooms, silver cups, candlesticks, and jewelry to forge bullets. Children carried powder kegs through the shattered streets, their small hands blackened by smoke. Priests walked among the wounded, blessing soldiers before each assault, their chants echoing between burning churches. The city's stones bore the wounds of endless cannon fire, patched again and again by von Starhemberg's weary men using rubble, and sometimes the fallen. Hunger and sickness stalked every alley, yet the ringing of church bells still stirred hearts. Vienna had ceased to be just a city. It had become the soul of Europe's resistance, a place where courage refused to die. Far from Vienna's siege, the Allied armies gathered in Tulln, a rare moment of unity among Christian forces. Over 70,000 soldiers stood ready, led by King Jan Sobieski. Polish hussars, German infantry, and Bavarian cavalry combined their strength, setting aside past divisions. Sobieski's plan was audacious. His forces would march through the dense Vienna woods, descend from the mountains, and strike the Ottoman forces by surprise. The alliance moved forward as one, bound by their shared destiny. On September 11, 1683, they began their march toward Vienna, where fate awaited. On the night of September 11th, a profound silence settled over the mountains. The Christian army camped high above Vienna, fires burning beneath a canopy of stars. Priests led their prayers for victory, their voices rising with hope. Below, the Ottomans celebrated, certain that victory was within their grasp. But fate had other plans. As dawn approached, Sobieski rode along the lines of his men, his armor gleaming in the firelight. His voice rang out, calm and strong. "Tomorrow we fight not for one nation, but for Christendom itself." The soldiers crossed themselves, preparing for the battle that would change the course of history. At dawn on September 12, 1683, the Battle of Vienna erupted with fury. The Ottomans struck first, bombarding the city's walls with relentless cannon fire, believing victory was imminent. Yet, they failed to notice the growing threat from the hills. From the edge of the Vienna woods, the Allied army appeared Polish cavalry, German infantry, and Bavarian artillery glinting in the first light of day. Cannon smoke filled the valley as the two mighty forces clashed in a struggle for the future of Europe. Every shot, every movement held the fate of nations in the balance. The first hours of the Battle of Vienna were filled with fury. Ottoman forces launched wave after wave of infantry, but the Christian defenders stood firm. The air was thick with the sound of war drums and battle cries. Cannonballs ripped through the ranks, tearing men and horses apart. On the right flank, German and Austrian troops slowly pushed forward, reclaiming lost ground. By midday, the Ottoman lines began to weaken. In a desperate move, Kara Mustafa ordered his elite janissaries to counterattack, unaware that Sobieski's Polish hussars were preparing to strike with their final decisive charge. By mid-afternoon, the tide of war began to shift. The Allied infantry advanced relentlessly, pressing the Ottomans back toward their sprawling encampments. Austrian and Bavarian cannons thundered, shattering enemy lines and filling the plains with smoke so thick that the sun itself seemed to dim. The once confident Ottoman formations began to waver, confusion spreading like wildfire among the ranks. Kara Mustafa, refusing to admit defeat, tried desperately to rally his men, believing he could still seize victory. Yet from the western hills came a low rumble, the unmistakable sound of hooves. The ground trembled as Sobieski's winged hussars assembled, their silver armor flashing like living lightning under the afternoon sun. The Allies, sensing the moment, steadied their lines. The hour of reckoning for Europe was at hand. At around 5 in the afternoon, the signal was given. From the hills above Vienna, the Polish winged hussars, 2,000 armored riders, burst into motion. Behind them thundered the German and Austrian cavalry, forming a wave of steel and courage. It was the largest cavalry charge ever witnessed in European history. The earth trembled under the pounding of hooves, and the sound echoed like a storm through the valley. Their long lances glittered in the fading light as they struck the Ottoman lines with devastating force. The impact shattered the enemy ranks. Soldiers scattered, banners fell, and the once proud Ottoman formation broke apart in confusion. Even the janissaries, the empire's elite, could not hold their ground. Within moments, the unstoppable fury of Sobieski's charge turned the battlefield into chaos and sealed the fate of the Ottoman siege. As the Christian forces surged forward, the Ottoman camp descended into utter chaos. Fires spread from tent to tent as soldiers trampled one another in blind panic. Horses broke loose, wagons overturned, and the once proud banners of the crescent fell into the dirt. Kara Mustafa rode desperately through the smoke, shouting for his men to stand their ground, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of defeat. The mighty army that had once threatened all of Europe was now collapsing before his eyes. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the great Ottoman host was no more. The battlefield burned beneath the orange glow of dusk, and across the smoldering plains lay the fallen symbols of empire. Vienna was saved, and with it, the spirit of a continent reborn. As dusk fell on September 12th, King Jan Sobieski rode triumphantly through the gates of Vienna. The streets erupted with joy. Citizens cheered, cried, and fell to their knees in gratitude. The defenders, weary and wounded, embraced their liberators as church bells began to ring across the city. Count von Starhemberg, his face darkened by smoke and blood, greeted Sobieski with tears of relief, whispering thanks for saving not just Vienna, but all of Europe. Fires still burned in the distance, yet their glow no longer spoke of destruction. It was the light of deliverance. Torches illuminated the proud faces of soldiers and townsfolk alike, united in victory. That night, the bells of Vienna sang of freedom, and the name of Sobieski the Lion of Lech echoed through every street as the savior of Christendom. Defeated and broken, Kara Mustafa Pasha fled the smoking ruins of Vienna, his once proud army scattered across the plains. He reached Belgrade carrying not the spoils of conquest, but the weight of failure. News of the catastrophe reached Istanbul swiftly. Sultan Mehmed IV, enraged by the loss that shook the empire, placed the blame entirely upon his Grand Vizier. Months later, in December 1683, Kara Mustafa was summoned before the imperial envoys. Kara Mustafa was summoned before the imperial envoys. In a dimly lit tent, he knelt calmly, knowing what awaited him. The executioners approached in silence, bearing a silk cord, the traditional sentence for failed viziers of the empire. As the cord tightened around his neck, the dream of Ottoman dominance over Europe faded forever. The defeat at Vienna not only ended a campaign, but marked the beginning of a slow, irreversible decline for the once mighty Ottoman Empire. The victory at Vienna did more than save one city. It reshaped the continent. It ended the Ottoman advance into Central Europe and sparked a new age of unity among Christian powers. The Holy League, formed soon after, launched campaigns that would push the Ottomans back for centuries. Vienna became the bulwark of European civilization, standing proudly as the city that turned the tide of history. The Battle of Vienna became one of the turning points in European history. It was remembered not just as a military victory, but as a clash of civilizations, faiths, and empires. Paintings, songs, and chronicles celebrated Sobieski as the savior of Europe. For centuries, historians would look back on 1683 as the moment Europe took its stand and prevailed. In the years that followed, Vienna transformed from a city of war to a center of culture and learning. Music, architecture, and philosophy flourished under the peace that victory had secured. The same streets once scarred by cannon fire would later echo with Mozart's melodies and Enlightenment thought. The city that once stood at the edge of destruction became the beating heart of European civilization. After Vienna, the Ottomans would never again threaten Western Europe. The empire slowly withdrew from Hungary and the Balkans. Its power waned while Europe surged into an age of exploration and industry. The Siege of Vienna marked the end of one era and the birth of another, an age where Europe would dominate world history. The Siege of Vienna in 1683 was more than a battle. It was a turning point that defined continents. The courage of the defenders, the unity of nations, and the faith that bound them all shaped the destiny of the Western world. From that moment onward, Europe stood not in fear, but in confidence. The Battle of Vienna became the legend of endurance, faith, and freedom, a story that echoes through the centuries as the battle that saved Europe.